Hello and welcome to Nikon Report, your weekly roundup of all the latest Nikon news and all other photographic announcements that we found interesting. It's Konstantin here.
And this is Becky.
All right, let's do it. We came to the point in our lives and yours where all the announcements have been made, and now we're in a period of limbo before the next rush of announcements, probably around September time. So we're gonna talk about things.
We're going to talk about things.
Yeah.
It's usually what happens on a podcast.
Exactly. And hopefully you like it or not.
Hopefully you like it.
All right, the first one up on the agenda is Nikon Z8 Deliveries. So we've been asked around, so what's up with the Z8? If I'm order one now, will I get it tomorrow? Well, here's Becky to answer what's happening with Z8 at Grace.
With the service advisory that came out a few weeks ago, Nikon obviously had a bit of a situation where they needed to deal with some of the stock that was out there, and also just make sure that any stock that they were shipping from that day onwards was not affected by the service advisory. So we haven't seen any deliveries for a little while now. We are expecting a delivery, at least in Europe, this month, i.e. July. We're already in the second week of July, can you believe? I don't know how that happened.
Time flies.
I know. And essentially, if you are looking at purchasing a Z8 in the imminent future, if you need it for a trip, I would say get your orders in now. Don't wait until 3 days before your trip to place your order, because unfortunately there are no guarantees it's going to arrive in time. However, thankfully, the initial deliveries of the Z8 throughout the whole of June were very generous. So we're not looking at a Z9 situation at this point. We're not looking at months and months. We're looking at few weeks before we get more. I don't know what the situation is like in the rest of the world.
Well, in matter of fact, we're looking at about 4 weeks or so. That's what a lot of dealers say, but I think a lot of people get them a lot faster. Now, you mentioned the Z8 service announcement, and Tom Hogan had an interesting article about Z8 return for service time.
Okay.
Now, he had updates on the turnaround in the Nikon servicing department in the United States. He said that people dropping off the cameras, the turnover is 2 to 3 days, and some people could actually get the camera returned to them on the same day, but that would require quite a long wait. What he says, and he thinks that actually the repair itself is not that big, and once kind of the camera ends up on the technician desk, the repair itself doesn't take too much time.
Makes sense.
So in terms of this, yeah, it's an easy repair, and overall, yeah, if you're dropping off, if you live locally, then it's something between 1 to 3 days eventually, so you can maybe collect on the same day or within 2 to 3 days. Now, if you ship into them, the turnaround is about 9 to 12 days in the United States. Now, in the UK, the situation is similar. We will be shipping our Z8 at some point in the next couple of weeks to Nikon, and we will be documenting the thing. So if Nikon is watching this, we want our camera back as soon as.
Nice and fast.
No pressure. Now, more things from the United States. Apparently, Nikon USA is running some rebates, or what we call in the UK promotions, and there's a lot of promotions there on millions of things. What caught my eye is that Z5 is doing really well with their discounts. So again, the camera can be had under $1,000. If you're looking at Z6 Mark II, apparently there's a kit with 24 to 72.8. So that's a nice big lens. And on that, you have a saving of $600. So that's make it under $3,800, which is pretty good in my opinion.
That's amazing.
Now, on to other things. Apparently some patents popped up in Japan. And according to our subnet, on July the 10th, Nikon's interesting patent applications were published. They had 6 patents, but technically it's for 3 lenses. So first one is Z24mm f4 PF, 16mm f4 PF, and ZDX 18mm f4 PF, which is quite strange. Obviously, in case of patents doesn't mean the real lens, but it's quite interesting to see.
Interesting that they have got the 24 f4 PF. I don't know why that would be a PF lens or why it would be f4. Obviously, we're looking at a translation here, but it does say the lens configuration and parameters are different from the existing Nikon Z lenses. The open f value is quote unquote f2.8/f4. which is a medium aperture. Not really sure why it would be f2.8/f4 when we're seeing f4, but maybe they're not quite sure what they're doing yet on the aperture side of things. A short stubby 24mm f2.8 would be very welcome, I think. Having two DX lenses in there as well is encouraging, a 16mm and an 18mm, which obviously with the 16mm, that would be a 24mm equivalent, and the 18mm would be about a 27mm equivalent in FX terms. So very interesting little lenses here if they do ever come to fruition. They've got the optical designs up there ready to go, including the focal length, the aperture, and all of the elements and how they will sit.
There's some sketches as well, not hand-drawn, which is a good thing. So all DX lenses are very welcome in the Nikon Z lineup. The more the merrier. Now, since it's going to be a dry couple of months, and we talked about upcoming Nikon lenses and what we think is going to come in. So I think we should do the honors and talk about what cameras do we think are going to come in the future, what's going to be released next.
Okay.
And we're going to base it on Tom Hogan's article, which is called So What's Left Undone. So first one up, he starts to talk about Z6 III and Z7 Mark III, and he says that it appears that Nikon won't be iterating those until 2024. Let's hope it's early 2024, because that would be 3.5-year cycle for products that really should be on a 2 or 3 year update path. Now, yay or nay?
I think that Nikon are aware that the Z6 II and Z7 II are coming towards the end of their life cycle. They will be 3 years old as of September, October this year. And that is quite long, considering that those two products are key products for Nikon. We've certainly seen, just in the general figures of not just us, but everyone else, that the 6.2 and the 7.2 have slowed down a fair bit. However, they're still fantastic cameras. There is no denying that. So I think it would be unfortunate if Nikon waited another year, basically, until they updated those two cameras.
I agree with Tom. If you're not going to see it this year, then it has to be really something between January and March next year. So just for the reason that, yes, Nikon themselves agreed that they're a bit slow on that one.
Yeah.
But in the replacement of that, a lot of pundits on the internet think that the full-frame ZF, which is a bigger brother of ZFC, will come. And it will be a kind of a hybrid Generation 2/Generation 3 cameras.
Okay.
So it's not a fully, let's say, a Z6 Mark III with the old dials of ZFC, but it will have the dials of ZFC, but with some parts from Gen 3 and some parts from Gen 2.
Right. Okay. But with that retro design, the controls that we see in the ZFC, presumably a slightly bigger design because it's going to house a full frame sensor and would, I assume, have IBIS. So, okay. I can see that happening. I think it would be an odd choice on the part of Nikon to bring that out before they bring out the Z6 II, Z7 II replacements. Saying that, if they decide that the Z7 III doesn't really have a place because we've already got 3 45 megapixel cameras on the market now, and they then make the ZF a 24 megapixel camera, that will always beg the question, what's going to be in those Gen 3 cameras? Yeah,
well, Tom expects it to be a tweaked Z6 II image sensor, aka 24 megapixel, then XPEED 7 processor, which is in Z9 and Z8, and the new focus system, but obviously ZFC-like controls.
Right.
Now, the question is, if that's the case, then what Z6 Mark III is going to be? Are we going to get a bump in resolution or not? Obviously, we had this great discussion with Matt Irvin, and my only counterpoint is 24 is great, but do you want to have 24 megapixels for the next 5 years? You know, from 2024 to 2029. Obviously, some people will, and they will be happy to that. I would personally prefer to get a slight bump, so get all the benefits of the, speed, but if you bump it up to a high resolution sensor, that would be amazing. So the point being is, really, I personally would prefer to see Z6 Mark III first, then the ZF later. But it seems to me that if you're going to see ZF first, that just gives the breathing space between the releases of Z8 and Z6 and Z7 Mark III cameras.
I see where you're going with that. Okay.
Now, I guess tell us in the comments below, would you like to see a ZF with a kind of a hybrid Z6 II sensor and fast autofocus of a new generation of cameras, or would you like to actually get a Z6 Mark III, which is a modern camera, similar to a Z6 II, but much faster autofocus system? I guess, updated specifications, but feels like a Z6 Mark II camera.
I understand your thinking on that they will bring out a ZF to space things out. And then I assume that considering that Nikon plan out their releases years in advance, they are way ahead of us in terms of what they figured out they're going to do.
They have a plan.
They have a plan.
Yeah.
They're not sort of sitting there going, I wonder what the internet thinks we should bring out.
Yeah.
Let's do that. They've already decided.
That's right. And my point being, the reason why I'm saying this, I'm just trying to justify how they think, not what I think.
For sure.
Because I want Z6 III and Z7 Mark III now.
Yes.
With all the goodies from Z8.
Yeah.
We need that. Don't care about frame rate. Z7 III landscape camera. Yeah. Z6 III fast, great low light,
Video,
yada, yada. Even if it's 24 megapixels, I'm sure people will buy it. My point being is, if the pundits say ZF and it's true, if it's true, then we need to think like they think. You need to put yourself in their shoes.
Need to think like a Nikon camera designer.
Exactly. And then try to justify it. Not just say, because I want to, but because they think that ZF would make more sense because they can sell those. And then at that point, Z8 was long enough that we can release Z6 Mark III and sell tons of those.
And then it will make sense. Well, okay, there is that. We have to put ourselves in their shoes and try and understand the logic behind it. But then Thom said, what about a high-res camera? He said, some of you will say, but there's no high-resolution camera. There are actually three, Z7 II, Z8, Z9. Despite Sony's recent update to the Sony A7R, now Mark V, he's not convinced that 60 plus megapixels full frame is the way to go. If you need more pixels, I'd seriously contemplate medium format. This is what he says. Moreover, for the primary uses of higher resolution, pixel shift actually might be a better choice than more pixels.
Yeah, let me just put my tinfoil hat on. I'm just going to say to the internet, I think we, the internet, being conditioned into thinking that 45 megapixels is all you need on a full frame camera. Who's with? All right, I'm removing my tinfoil hat now. Okay, moving on.
Okay, so I at the moment don't see Nikon doing more than 45 megapixels. I think that they're currently very happy with what they've got. They've got nice balance. We've got high resolution, high speed, and we've now seen that they can prove we can get up to 120 frames per second with a sensor like that. Back in the DSLR days, the limit of the high resolution sensors was A, low light performance, and B, the speed at which cameras could then write onto memory cards. And that was always like the limiter, should we say. We obviously don't have that problem anymore. So now we're looking at other issues like diffraction and file sizes, buffer size. And if it's going to be in a smaller camera like a Z7 II, for example, it's going to be a much slower camera than what we've gotten used to with a Z8 and a Z9.
But I think it makes a perfect sense for Z7 III to have a high-resolution sensor to be a slow camera.
Right.
You see what I mean? So because the whole game was we release a high-resolution sensor, which is slow, and then for the next 5 years, we're going to bring the speed to it by increasing the speed of the processor, speed of the buffer, and allowing for the computer inside the camera to handle all this data really, really fast. And now we're at the point where Z9, Z8 does this 45 megapixel without any hitch whatsoever. So the next one up, go up to 60. Also, if you start to think in terms of how do you differentiate between Z8 and Z7 Mark III, are we going to have the same resolution camera and then we just try to slow it down to low frame rate, smaller buffer, and then lower video functionality? That's how we're going to differentiate them.
It doesn't make a lot of sense, does it? Because the Z7 II already essentially does that.
In a way.
So what would the Z7 III have? It would have to have a better autofocus system, but not the other stuff.
I guess we get 8K 30 frames instead of 60 or something like this. Does it make sense?
I don't think so. I don't.
Would it make more sense to release a 60 megapixel, keep it slow, a landscape camera, a beauty photographer camera who doesn't need autofocus? Would it make sense? So then you have Z8, fast and speed, mini Z9, which is not mini Z9, but it is. And then you have Z7. I think it makes more sense to have different entries into the system, not to keep all look alike.
Yes.
And then you say, they're all the sensor. Let me put the comparison charts and spend half an hour looking at what the differences are. That's the thing. I personally would rather go for high resolution sensor just for the sake of it, really, more than anything else.
Because it's quite an investment designing, building, marketing, producing en masse a camera. They can't just bring out a camera for the sake of it. They have to bring out a camera that they believe is going to sell well.
Yes.
So
the question to the public is, if Z7 Mark III has 45 megapixel sensor, would you buy it over Z8 or over Z7 Mark II?
And of course, it will depend on the price point of all of those.
Let's look at the DX range, where all cameras have the same sensor. In Tom's opinion, it's a mess. I tend to agree with him. Yeah. What do you think?
Well, he does say that essentially, while we have 3 DX cameras, they are essentially the same camera in different sheep's clothing. Dressing the same thing differently doesn't really make it different. The danger for Nikon DX is multiple. Nikon needs to be looking in both directions, both the leading and the trailing competitors. He says that he thinks Canon is likely to stay the leader by just essentially taking their DSLR lineup and putting it into mirrorless or words to that effect. He says second place, Sony has 3 aging cameras in the crop sensor range, but looming just behind Nikon competitively is Fujifilm APS-C. Fujifilm too has set sight on Nikon's market share and is doing that with crop sensor. 40 plus Fujifilm APS-C lenses make Nikon's 5 look paltry. Fujifilm's aggressive body updates lately make the ZDX cameras feel more like entry toys. 40 megapixels certainly makes 20 megapixels look old school. The list goes on. So the problem for Nikon is that if Canon, Sony and Fujifilm all take Nikon's crop sensor market, there's no reason for Nikon to be in that market. Being all FX would give Nikon no chance to regain any of the overall market share ground they lost.
So yeah, I think the reason why he comes back to Fuji at a later stage is because, yeah, we don't know actually the proper DX market share. We just know the market share by the brands.
Right.
And technically, while Fujifilm DX lineup is their primary game in town, really, and GFX is kind of their secondary system, you know, so we don't really know how much domination they have in DX range particularly. That's why he brings Canon and Sony first.
I see.
Now, yeah, if you're looking at Fujifilm, they're probably the market leaders in DX in terms of technology. And yeah, looking at the 40 megapixel DX sensor, which is a lot of little pixels cramped into the tiny sensor, and having their 26 megapixel really fast readout sensor that will give you all the frame, etc. you want, they definitely is in that space. So the question is really is, Canon has advantage with the consumer. It's a well-recognized brand. Obviously, Sony, marketing-wise, they've done really well.
Yeah.
If you go on YouTube, it's still a Sony domination space, etc. So I think, yeah, he's right. Nikon has to look at all 3.
Yes.
And decide where he want to be. Because if all of them going to take all that Nikon DX market share, what's the point of Nikon to be there? You know, if we treating that system as afterthought.
Yeah.
And it felt for quite some time that they are treating it afterthought. You know, so I think it is a time where we need to address mid full frame range. After that, at this point, we have, I think, very nice full-fledged full frame system. And I think at that point, we need to look into DX. And while maybe late to the party, as always with Nikon, Nikon does it at their own pace and time.
Yes.
But when they do it right. So if Nikon gets this approach, I think it makes sense, maybe late, but at the same time, if you've seen what Nikon done with Z8 and Z9, I think the good things are to come to DX line.
Yeah, so Tom's solution is that they build a full rationalized DX camera lineup, at a minimum a creative vlogger. Z30 is actually fine in that space right now. Entry, mid-level and high enthusiasts. So what we're kind of missing here is we've got the vlogger creator camera in the Z30. Technically, the entry mid-level should be covered by the Z50 and the ZFC. Those 2 cameras overlap a little bit too much.
I think they all 3 overlap a bit too much. That's the problem.
And then high enthusiast, we definitely don't have a high enthusiast camera. He says at the high end of the lineup, it has to be as buzzworthy as the Z8, Z9 are, and as competitors R7 and XH2 models are. Then he says we need more DX lenses.
Yes. So coming back to the high lineup, so we've actually need the G500 in mirrorless system,
yes.
Or AKA it would be a Z8 body with a smaller sensor.
Yeah.
Call it Z90, you name it. We need that camera, and that would be a buzz worthy, you know. So if we have cameras now that Fuji can charge £2,500 for the body, I think, you know, if you get this camera in £2,500 space or less, to be aggressive,
Yes.
then it will definitely sell like hotcakes. I do agree with you. We literally at this moment have 3 cameras with identical sensors, which are very difficult to justify. The main difference is if you look at it, yes, Z30 doesn't have a built-in viewfinder. But if you look at the rest, it's basically the same thing.
Yeah.
So what we need to do is to have actually differences between the cameras. Maybe one is going to have a different sensor.
Yes.
Another one is going to be better in low light. And I think we definitely need to have a vibration reduction on the sensor. Vlogging camera with vibration reduction sensor will sell more than a vlogging camera without VR on the sensor.
Very true.
And from our experience, we know that. We tried that. And we've noticed the difference between Z6 footage and Z30 footage just based on a general shake. Now, back to lenses.
So at the moment, we've got our 16 to 50, 50 to 250. Fine. We have our 18 to 140. Excellent. We've got our little prime 24mm and we've got our wide angle 12 to 28. So those are the 5 lenses that we have. We could definitely do with more primes, I think. As Thom suggests, some FX primes that cross over with the DX range quite nicely. So we're talking like shorter, wider primes that are lightweight, that fit nicely on a DX body, but could also be used on a full frame camera. He says like the 26, 28, 40, and 50mm macro, all which work beautifully on DX bodies, but also some more zooms. So we've already talked about 18 to 300.
Yeah, we talked about all of them. So get us more zooms. The more the merrier. Get us ultra wide angle zoom, which is not power zoom. You know, why not to have 2 options?
Yeah.
Why not to get 14mm DX? Why not to have 16mm DX, 18mm?
1 to 9mm.
Exactly. Absolutely. Just look at the Fuji lineup, copy it,
And paste.
copy and paste it. And obviously, Nikon has the design in place for the F-mount version. You don't need to reinvent the wheel. You can improve on that. Make it more round, let's say. But after all DXs, we haven't even touched the video cameras or some accessories. So do you think we'll release a proper dedicated video camera? Or do you think Z8 and Z9 are pretty good for the package we get in terms of video functionality?
I think that they have most of the things that videographers need, but there are going to be videographers out there who might stumble across this podcast, or our regular viewers, if you are, thank you for being here, who might say, no, what I actually need as a professional videographer is this feature, which Nikon don't supply, which I am absolutely desperate for. So I'm sure that there are videographers that will say that we need dedicated video cameras. As a sort of occasional videographer that produces 3 videos a week, but also is actually a stills photographer.
Let's say that's a lot more than a lot of photographers do. You know.
So as one of those folks, I find what we have in the Z8 and the Z9 and the Z6 II that we're currently using more than adequate for our needs and purposes, but there are going to be broadcasters that need other features.
Let's say we are not heavy users.
No.
We are occasional ponders.
We are.
With our little channel.
We're actually like, we are heavy users because of the amount of video that we produce, but we're not professional users. I don't know.
Well, we don't shoot with things attached to it on the rigs, and and we don't use them as crash cameras. We don't need the raw functionality. We don't need the 10-bit analog, all sorts of things. So we are not power users for sure, but we shoot our little videos on our little channel. The fun stuff takes us 5 seconds, as you all think on the internet. So, but would you rather? So would you rather? Every
time.
With a straight face, Becky. So would you rather revamp the DX lineup and make DX users happy? Or would you rather put your resources into a dedicated video camera and potentially all sorts of things that come with it? Maybe lenses, maybe accessories, you name it.
So I don't know if this is the right answer, but I would like to see Nikon continue to support their DX users. I love the idea of bringing new people into the Nikon fold with video cameras for sure. But I feel like recent years we've certainly kind of neglected the DX users. And I think it's important, as Thom says, if Nikon don't continue to develop that area more, then they're going to lose that whole market share. And that is going to be a problem for them. So I think that they should just continue to support the people that we already have in the fold,
Well, I'm in a camp that Nikon should bring Super 8 and Super 16 cameras
Yeah.
back.
Why not?
with the digital sensors. No, I think I agree with you. I think as Nikon as a photography brand, it would be good to get the foundation right. And DX was a part of the Nikon's foundation since the early digital cameras. Obviously, video will bring the new crowd to the market. That's the thing. And of course, with the strategy of Nikon saying, well, instead of bringing DX, we're going to make full frame more affordable, and we want to bring all the DX users to full frame. I don't know what they're going to choose. That's the thing. But I agree with you. I think, we definitely need something like Z90 at least. And vibration reduction on the sensor.
Yes.
Now, accessories. The only reason I put accessories is because I want to talk about flash. I think there's a bit of concern in Nikon's community, and obviously we've discussed it last time, and what people say, and the consensus is that Nikon is not going to make flash guns anymore, and it seems like all the partnerships with Nissin as well as Profoto would make Nikon lineup better, but you just need to go to those brands in order to have your flash needs fulfilled. So what do you think? Are we going to see another SB 6000, 7000 flash gun, or do you think it's all up to very expensive Profoto or not as expensive Nissin?
I think it's a shame if they don't do more flash, because there is definitely still a need for speed lights. And
need for speed.
There's a need for speed lights. And the Z system users, those who started out with the system, thought, oh, this is a smaller, lighter alternative to DSLRs, therefore I would like a small and light flash to go with it.
Yeah, the Fast and Furious flash.
Which is gone in 60 seconds. So whatever.
I know, it's this rat race for all the new models, and releases.
So I think it would not be much effort on their part to take the SB5000 and the SB500, call them the ZSB 5000 and ZSB 500, re-optimize them for Z cameras and re-release them. I don't think that would be too much to ask. However, it may be a little bit more than Nikon think is going to give them in terms of return.
Exactly.
So maybe we're stuck with, I'm not a huge flash user either. I would love a new macro flash kit from Nikon, but we've had the SBR1C1 for well over 15 years now.
That's true. Well, as they always say, it's not a sprint, it's a marathon. So in terms of this, who knows, maybe Nikon will surprise us.
Maybe.
You never know.
Maybe they won't.
Moving on. We're done with the news, but apparently a very rare Nikon 6mm fisheye f2.8, the one we tried on a Z9 the other month.
I do remember that.
So apparently that one was listed on the internet, on the places like eBay, for the whopping 130,000 euros.
This is a huge price increase from what we've seen in the past. Obviously, Gray's Westminster broke headlines when we had a 6mm f2.8 fisheye for sale some years ago now. We're talking nearly 10 years
been a while.
ago, I think. Yeah, for 100,000. And just to recap, it is one of those lenses where only 200 or less were made or known of, and we don't see them very often. But I don't know if he'll be selling it for 130,000 euros, to be honest.
Well, good luck to him. But if you want to see that lens in action, then definitely check our video with this lens attached to Z9 in the links in the comments below.
Yes.
Now, from one auction to another auction, the Nikon F camera used to shoot some of Jimi Hendrix's album cover was up for auction. Those fantastic psychedelic colors.
They're pretty amazing, actually. The Nikon F camera kit in original circa 1960s Halliburton carry case, used circa 1967 to 69 by legendary psychedelic photographer Carl Ferris to shoot the famed US debut psychedelic album covers, gosh, they like that word, of Jimi Hendrix, Are You Experienced, Electric Ladyland, Axis Bold as Love, and The Jimi Hendrix Experience, as well as Donovan's Gift from a Flower to a Garden, Wear Your Love Like Heaven, and The Hollies Evolution.
Wow, the kit includes Nikon F camera, photomic FT and light meter head attached, 5 Nikon lenses, 50, 55, 35, 28 and 105 lenses, a roll of original unexposed Kodak Ektachrome color in fair 35mm film, out of production since 1977. Can you imagine that?
Wow.
This type of film was used by Ferris while shooting all the above-mentioned album covers. Also includes 3 color transparencies and 3 signed 12x12 prints of LP cover images. Oh, I would love those. So those are signed by Ferris, Hendrix, Donovan, and the Hollies.
Amazing. That's very exciting.
So it's been sold now.
How much was it sold for? Do you know?
So it was sold. We don't know the price.
We don't actually.
But it probably was lower than 130,000 euros.
I think so. But amazing stuff. Anyway, we love legendary bits and bobs like that. Next up, in your third-party news, finally, the three-legged thing Zooey, which is the proprietary L bracket for the Nikon Z8, has been announced. It is due out in September, and three-legged thing are already taking orders. You can place your pre-order on the Grays Westminster website. It is available in darkness, which is their matte black color, and also copper, which is the lovely fetching bright orange. So it will be supplied with a Peak Design Capture version 3 compatible adapter and a long pass-through screw to enable the L bracket to be used with PD capture clip. So if you're a Peak Design user, it has access to all the ports on the side and the bottom cutouts. You can use it in vertical and horizontal mode.
Okay, so that happened in the UK. And in Japan, company Leofoto also announced an L Plate for Z8 as well. This one is compatible with the battery replacement and cable release installation. Will be available on the July 17th. The price in Japan is 17,160 yen, including tax.
Ooh.
And that one is the only one out of three. So we have small rig, Zooey now, which is from three-legged thing, and Leofoto. And that's the only one that you can actually extend the side so you have a slightly better placement for the cables. So in my opinion, that would be an interesting comparison of the three if we ever get chance.
Well, Small Rig sold out of theirs within the first couple of days of putting it out there, but we are hoping to try the Small Rig one out at some point. If Leofoto would like to send us one to test out, let us know, no problem. And we will definitely get our hands on a three-legged thing, Zooey, when it comes out officially in September as well, so that we can give you our opinion on all of them. As a three-legged thing user, I'm hoping that the Zooey is going to be the perfect fit for our Z8.
Fantastic. And then finishing up with the accessories, Megadap ETZ21 adapter had a firmware update. So they updated a bunch of things. So if you got one of those, then head to their website and update the firmware. We talked about the Pro version being released at some point, so that's been rumored. We don't know what the difference is, but it's good to have a firmware update for the existing one. Now, onto the lenses. Company called Sirui is to announce their first autofocus anamorphic lenses for Nikon Z mount. Now, they did release a bunch of Z mount anamorphic lenses already, but they're manual focus only. Now, this is the first one. It's autofocus, and maybe that what one of the Nikon managers meant when they say that the good things are going to come into video space to Nikon users. So aren't you excited, Becky?
Sure, yes. I would love to try one.
I'm very excited. I've never tried anamorphic lens in my life. So I want to see how this whole squeeze and de-squeeze thing works. What kind of effect is going to do with all the flaring and stuff. I mean, I've seen it on Star Trek. So
yes.
It looks pretty good. So I want to try that for our podcast, perhaps, because that's the most cinematic thing we do.
Absolutely.
Now, it is the time of the year where all the camera companies will announce their financials.
Ooh.
And DC Live Japan has a schedule for you. It's exciting. It's like a Women's World Cup, which is starting very, very soon as well. Now we have all the schedules. So on 27th of July, Canon will announce their financials. Then on 31st, it's Panasonic. Nikon comes next on August 8th, as well as Ricoh and Tamron, all on the same day. And then finishing up, it's August the 9th, Sony and Fujifilm announcement. I'm going to buy lots of popcorn.
And yeah.
I'm going to take days off.
Okay.
And I'm just going to watch it live on whatever YouTube channel they're going to show. They probably won't. But I'm going to take my abacus out, going to go through hundreds of pages of their PDF documents, and going to check all their financial and tell you if they were correct or they made a mistake.
Okay. Be sure to submit your days off requests.
Exactly.
All right, now let's move on to our review section. We have the 14-30 f4 super wide zoom real world review by Matt Irwin. This is an interesting one. Obviously, this lens has been out for a few years now, but Matt decided to do stills and video, real world, night and day shooting. Said it's small, light, wide. It's a traveler lens. Definitely one worth watching if you haven't yet jumped on the bandwagon for the wide angle lenses yet.
And if you're looking for the latest stuff, then obviously 18600 lens came out very recently, and Jan Wegner compares this lens with a Canon and Sony equivalents and tells you which one is slightly better or not. So have a look at that. I'm personally a Nikon shooter. I don't really look at other comparison with other brands.
No, but some people own multiple brands.
Exactly. If you do find it interesting, then
we have a video for you. That's right. And if you were wondering when our 55mm Vöchtlander versus 58mm 1.4 lens review was coming out, we did our comparison and it came out this weekend. So you can go and have a little look if you've been on the fence about which F-mount Vöchtlander lens to buy, or Voigtlander for those people that can't pronounce it properly. And that's a wrap. Thanks for joining us this week. Thank you very much for watching and or listening. Please give us a like and a subscribe if you're on YouTube. If you're listening on a podcast platform, give us a rating, a follow, a review, all those beautiful things. Have you heard of Apple Podcasts? Spotify, yes, and Amazon Music. We're all there. Even YouTube nowadays has a podcast section. We are there as well. Go find us, leave us a review. We would like to grow as a podcast as well as a video thing. So if you prefer to listen and not watch, then we are there to fill your ears with us. And if you'd like to find us on the internet, we're on Instagram. I'm at Rebecca_Danese. The shop's at Nikon at Grays. And I'm at Konstantin Kochkin. We do publish the shots we've taken with the lenses that we review. So if you want to see those, definitely check us out there. And we're soon to be on Threads. Yay. I don't know if we're going to do that, but anyway. We'll see you next week. Goodbye. Oh, dear.